We're going to hear from Brett Yormark, the commissioner of the Big 12, with a couple of comments to Ari Temkin of the Big 12 Network this morning on TuneIn Radio. We appreciate Ari for sharing that audio. West Virginia AD Ren Baker, what a weekend it is. By the way, Craig, they canceled classes among the county schools. They have not yet canceled the classes on campus. They're waiting for E. Gordon Gee to do that, and that's something Ren Baker says will be interesting. Now, I asked him about that. I thought it was the West Virginia classes, but it's county schools because of traffic. But as of about 2 hours ago, it was not the campus or classes at West Virginia.
I think you had that right the first time, right? It's E. Gordon Gee.
Yeah, E. Gordon Gee, I'm sorry.
You think you corrected yourself to the wrong way of pronouncing that.
Because that's the way I am.
Yeah, that's E. Gordon Gee. But, yeah, that came down yesterday that I had seen that headline towards the end of the show. And shout-out to our friend of the show, Coos, a massive West Virginia fan, does a really good job in his own right covering the Mountaineers, and he sent me a link last night. I meant to respond back to him to say thank you. But, yeah, I mean, I saw that, and I thought that's what that meant. But there's still, I guess, some holdouts in terms of making this weekend all about Pat McAfee and West Virginia and hosting Penn State. So, come on, what are you doing?
Yeah.
I mean, school, we can play school at any time, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Cardell Jones – said that a long time ago, and others have said as much or close to that. But no, I mean, that's, whatever. That's cool, though. It's fun that there's even that conversation happening. And it's obviously a very big deal in Morgantown, and there is a big crowd expected, so they're having to make some citywide decisions on how to handle all that, and that just tells you that it's going to be a massive next couple of days in Morgantown, and I can only imagine what it'll be like if they can somehow pull that upset on Saturday.
Well, the Ren Baker interview today at 5 from earlier today when I recorded him, and he does get into the Pat McAfee and other former players, Pat White, Slayton, among others, who really kind of got a little disjointed from the athletic department at West Virginia and what Ren Baker and company are doing, and that will be at 5 o'clock. We will hear from Brett Yormark, but look what Kim Coulter did. He ordered the 365 Sports logo from us. I sent it to him. It's been a couple of months ago. He has a great setup outside of Jones Stadium in Lubbock, and he put our logo on his tent. That, of course, the number one Big 12 show on YouTube, Brett. Kim, thank you very much for that and what he does with North Star Funding. He is such a generous guy to what we do, the gift cards and stuff he did for my brother. And now we have that on his tent outside of their tailgate area for Saturday.
That's awesome. I mean, that's an incredible just gesture by Kim and an incredible show of support for this show. And he's been along for, I don't know how long, like the majority of the time we've been on, right? Like, I don't remember when he first popped up, but he's been along for the ride for a while and has been incredibly generous, as you said, and I know I'm very familiar with the tech scene, so I know there's going to be a lot of people walking by and having fun coming up on Saturday, and hopefully seeing that. And for those that don't know, going, hey, what's that? And maybe joining the family. But
Yep.
Kim's definitely a member, and that's just an incredible thing for him to do. So yeah, really appreciate that.
We do appreciate it. And by the way, if you watch the show, you now don't feel any pressure to put it. Hell, we got to put it on our tent that we have around the street over at McLean Stadium inside the Brazos parking area. Big 12 tonight. Here's the entire schedule, but obviously there are games tonight among the Big 12 teams, including UCF on ESPN Plus tonight, hosting New Hampshire. Colorado in a game on ESPN, 8 o'clock against North Dakota State. 22nd ranked KU against Lindenwood. That game's in Kansas City. And 12th ranked Utah. The Utes, that's two of the new schools entering the Big 12 playing tonight. They play Southern Utah. That game a little bit later on at 9 o'clock.
Yeah, it's going to be a very busy night. And, the weeknight games, I think, are going to become far more commonplace now that the new TV deals and the new realignment and all that starts to come into play. So I was looking this first week, there's a bunch of weeknight games. And so that's, fun to have a bunch of options, not just on Saturday or even just Friday night, but to have some Thursday night action. That's not just like a one-off game or a lower level game that doesn't really garner a whole lot of interest, except for those that probably gamble or are fans of those schools, but like tonight, for example, is going to be like everybody's involved basically because, there's so many games, and you pointed out just from that league alone, but I mean, Missouri, they're borderline top 10 team. They're in action tonight, so it's going to be a very busy night. And I know there's NC State, as we'll get into, but yeah, it's the weekend's getting started here in a matter of hours.
Jarrett, the graphic that includes the top 25 teams, and two of them, of course, I mentioned with what KU and Utah are doing in their games tonight at home. Western Carolina and NC State, the 24th ranked team on ACC Network, and the SEC Network has 11th ranked Missouri, the Tigers, and Eli Drinkwitz hosting Murray State.
Yeah, I don't think you're on like crazy upset watch or anything, but it's great to see some of these games and just to have the options that we have in front of us the next 3 days. And I'm very interested in looking at Missouri. They're a team that had a really successful run last year, brings back a lot of components. Of course, you've got, Luther Burden as your headliner there and Brady Cook and so on and so forth, but it'd be good to get our first glimpse of them. NC State's obviously got interesting change at quarterback and, a team who's right in the midst of all that ACC talk and where do they fit in, but they're a very good program, so excited to see, their new look. And obviously there's a handful of Big 12 games that we'll get into as well that have a lot of interesting storylines as well.
Well, we will. One of the things about Colorado and North Dakota State, I saw this from Guy Haberman. He covers that area. Paul Catalina with us on 365 Sports. North Dakota State FCS levels do not have helmet communication. But teams were allowed to do that if they play somebody from the FBS. North Dakota State has the game with Colorado, and they did invest in that technical equipment, Paul, for one game, despite this being the only game against an FBS team they have this year.
Yeah.
That's a commitment.
Yeah, it is absolutely a commitment that they have there. And, I'm kind of with Craig. Like, there's not like a whole lot of games tonight that you're going to be like, hey, let's make sure that we're by the TV and watch them. But it would be good to get going. And I also think you can learn a lot about teams in these games because you see how they approach them. And then you also, I don't think you see strength so much in some of these games as you do weaknesses. And I learned that from watching Baylor last year where, they were a team that was going to struggle. And when they played teams that they should have handled, they didn't handle them, or by the time they started handling him, you'd already seen like, man, they're really getting after the passer here. Like, that shouldn't be a problem, and then it's going to make you worried.
Did y'all even pick up on the use of helmet communications last week? Did that even dawn on y'all while watching the games that there was any real difference?
The only thing I thought about that was different for me, and I have the sound down, so they might have been talking about it, was the fact that they had the 2-minute break at halftime. That was the first thing that I said, oh, that's different. Yeah,
that was a little different and something we knew was coming. We just didn't know like how that would fit into everything. But yeah, I mean, not that it was ever going to be something that was in your face and that you really no, like it's not like they have the alternate channel where you're listening in on the helmet cam, but I just wondered in terms of like pace and things if that was notable to anybody. But it's only the first week, and so I commend North Dakota State for going and splurging and taking advantage of this opportunity to have helmet comms, especially in a big opportunity in a big game on a big stage. I mean, it's one thing to go and play a team that's a level above you in terms of conference affiliation, in terms of money. It's another thing to play one of those teams and their head coach is Deion Sanders, and the whole world's going to be watching because they either love him and believe that Colorado's rising underneath his watchful eyes, or they are absolutely watching tonight to laugh their asses off because Colorado starts 0-1 and loses to FCS North Dakota State. So that's a really interesting game for a lot of people because you love them or you love to hate them. I feel like is what Colorado is right now.
And they kind of like that.
Yeah, and they embrace that, and I don't think they care one bit whatsoever. I don't think they know how to handle probably being liked by everybody. I think they need that chip on their shoulder, honestly. But, yeah, I think that's smart on North Dakota State's part. You got that opportunity. Go and take advantage of it, and see if it helps you out and maybe pulling a big upset.
Yeah, I said on Triple Option earlier, Steven asked me about, like, the watchability factor of this game. I said I think it's kind of high because – and this is an interesting opponent for them because what we know about North Dakota State is they're going to be very fundamental. Like, that's how they win games is they block, they tackle, they execute, they don't make little mistakes. And when they're playing other FCS teams, then they can, have those big play factors. But for them to beat a team like Colorado and hang in it, it's about making no mistakes where Colorado will make a lot of. And Colorado was not good at fundamentals last year and any stretch of the thing. They're really great at, holy crap, what was that? They've got some skill players, but in the nitty gritty of, the heart of football, they were really, really, really bad at it. And North Dakota State will show us at least a little bit if they're going to be better at it.
All right. Before we get to the Yormark comment, and Ari did a great job, and he never brought up UConn. He didn't really have to. It's about men's basketball, then eventually football. We'll get to that. The offensive coordinator at BYU last night saying that they have named a starter. They know who their starter is. And he also added that the quarterback who didn't get the starting job handled the news professionally and with class. I asked Jake Hatch, who, of course, covers Utah and also covers BYU, and he says the speculation, at least from what he gets, is that it is Retzlaff. Now, that would, and again, I don't know what kind of young man he is. I'm sure he's a great kid. But if it handled it professionally and with class, that could be both. It could be Bohannon, but I would think that the person who didn't get the job, or at least starter, would be very, very disappointed.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what you fought for all the way up until the day before the game or 2 days before the game. So, yeah, you didn't get the job promotion you wanted. You're going to be disappointed, right? You didn't get the girl you wanted. You're going to be disappointed. So, yeah, you didn't win the starting quarterback job. Of course you're going to be disappointed. But, I mean, it's good to hear whoever that was handled it. And, yeah, it could be either one because Gary Bohannon's not the only one with class, I think, in that locker room. So, I'm sure if that was Jake Retzlaff, then he probably, was able to handle it well. But, Retzlaff played a lot for them last year. And Gary, obviously, had his time there at South Florida and eventually now on his third team and looking to become a starter once again. I don't know. I don't get a feel because it's just a little bit too far out there. And honestly, like the feelings coming out of Provo aren't that great to begin with. So I don't know if it really matters who their starting quarterback is because I think they're both going to play. And I think it's just going to be a matter of who can play well enough to keep the job and not get replaced, at any moment during the course of a game, because it sounds like they don't have two quarterbacks and both are great, or they've got two quarterbacks and neither one are really good. It sounds like it's somewhere kind of in the middle. So I think this is probably going to play itself out a little bit further. I don't think this is the last we've heard of them having more than one quarterback, but if I had to guess, I don't really need to do that. I don't know. If I'm just taking a guess, I would say it's Retzlaff, his familiarity with the system and whatnot. But if it was Gary, I would not be surprised. And I would be really excited for him if that was the case.
We don't have a tweet, and that's fine because we don't always have to do that. Real quickly, and then the SEC has officially approved player availability injury reports for football, men's, women's basketball, and baseball. They must be submitted 3 days before each football game, daily updates, and a final 90-minute before the game time report, too. Basketball and all the others have different the night before, I guess, in the day or moment before the game. If they don't or they're inaccurate, teams will be fined anywhere from $25,000 up to $100,000 in football.
Yeah, I mean, the SEC is going with the NFL approach, very much like what the pros do. And so that's just more of this sport and I guess on a wider level, just college athletics, starting to lean more into the pro model. And we know with football, that's not just a concern for smaller schools, but that's like the dream scenario, I think, for some big schools. And for pundits and observers and whatnot, I think that's the fear for some, and that's the future that you see if you're others. That's where we are headed, and it's going to be more like this. I mean, I'm not somebody that's a gambler, right? I'm just not a part of that crowd, but I definitely know there's plenty in the industry that cover that well and that do dabble and all that. It's just not something I've ever been all that familiar with or really super involved with. But this does scream to me of here you go, gambling crowd. Here's another bone from the college football community, because why else would anybody need injury reports, right? I mean, your opponent would love them and vice versa, but this is very much throwing a bone to the folks out in Las Vegas to make these kinds of things available like you do with the pros. So, yeah, for that side of things, that's great. And I think in general, just having that kind of clarity is cool. I think to have that information out there is a benefit for media and fans as well. So, yeah, I like that they're going that route, but this definitely screams that it's much more influential on the betting side than anything else.
No question. Try to make sure there's no funny business, but you're going to have the Bill Belichick's or some others in college football that will play that game. Now, Ari Temkin, who was a part of the show yesterday and a part of the Big 12 Radio Network on TuneIn, mentioned to us that he had Brett Yormark on the show. And so he sent me the clip of the interview, the audio file, and he did get into basketball. He did not mention specifically UConn, but he didn't have to. Neither did Ari, and neither did Brett Yormark. And here's Brett Yormark's response.
Certainly the strength of the Big 12 at current is basketball. And historically, you've got pretty good track record of, being successful in terms of creating revenue streams and monetizing basketball and your team does, and being around the sport as well as you have. So I've used the analogy of, if you've got $10 and currently in college athletics, football is about 8.5 of the $10, which means basketball is about 50 cents or $1 of that. How much do you think, again, going to the $10 analogy in total, basketball is potentially worth of the $10 total?
Well, I can tell you this. I think it's a lot more, than what, the big distributors are investing in it today. Okay, and I've said that since the day I got here.
Yep.
Certainly, football drives the business, and I can't argue with you on that. But is basketball more valuable now than it's ever been, both men's and women's? Absolutely. And you saw what the NBA just did, and the WNBA in their recent TV deal, and I think that's indicative of the value of basketball. It's premium inventory, it's volume, and distributors want it, okay? And I think when we go back into the marketplace deal, we're going to have a lot of optionality. Because as I've said before, we might go back into the marketplace bundling all of our sports like traditionally it's been done, or maybe we explore some type of bifurcation, if that makes sense. But at least we have the optionality. And I think basketball is worth a lot more, when you think about how it compares to football. And when I look at my overall viewership of what we deliver to our distribution platforms, it's closer to 30% of total viewership being basketball related. And I can tell you right now, we're not getting 30% on the dollar for basketball.
Does the conference need to add more basketball programs in order to maximize that revenue stream in 2030, 2031?
No, I don't think we need to go just basketball specific. When we think about realignment, let's talk about the four corners. We were very strategic about it. It was very data driven, why we felt the four corners would be valuable. Obviously, we like their markets, we like their brands, we like their fan bases, but they got us to be better in football. We got better in basketball, and we got better in Olympic sports. So I do look at things very holistically. Markets matter, athletic performance matters, fan base matters, media value matters. So when I think about expansion, as I have, obviously, I look at it from lots of different lenses, not just one in particular. Now, the value proposition might be weighted a little bit more in one area than another, but I look at it very holistically. And what does realignment do to drive value for our membership, both short-term and long-term? So do I need to hone in on basketball specifically? I don't necessarily feel I need to do that. But I do look at it very holistically, and basketball plays a significant role, no different than football and market and brand and fan base.
So that's we'll do the football answer from him in between some of the segments we have. But that was Yormark. He never really denied anything. We know he's always like scratching something to find out if it has money underneath of it. Ari did a great job. Appreciate the audio from Ari and the Big 12 Radio Network.
Yeah, shout out to him for the interview and for sending that along to allow us to sit here and chat about it. I think that Brett Yormark is just doing his job for one, and I can't blame him for that whatsoever, no matter how you feel about any potential combination or any potential entry or any potential avenue he's traveling down, leaning more towards basketball or what have you. I appreciate that he's aggressive, and I appreciate that he's for the commissioners, maybe it gets annoying, all the ideas thrown at them, but I'd rather have that than just sit on your ass and not do anything like the league did for so long under different leadership.
For many years.
For a long time, and it cost them. So I love the aggressiveness, for one, and just the enthusiasm and the passion that he clearly has for trying to continuously improve this league in some way, and basketball seems like the most likely way to be able to do that outside of just the dream scenario where you're able to pluck away some ACC schools, right? And whatever combination of those there could be, although you're not in control of that timeline. You're a bit more in control of this scenario. I'm obviously somebody who's been on the record as more of a football fan, so for me, the UConn thing doesn't scratch much of an itch for me at all. But from a basketball standpoint, I totally get it. Like, I totally get why having UConn in the league would be awesome for a variety of different reasons, from TV ratings to maybe even your TV deal. The part that's just very uncertain is that Yormark is clearly convinced that basketball is going to be worth more, but we don't know that. I mean, he sounds like as confident as a person can probably be, to the point that I believe he's being told that by people that matter, but there's no proof that that's actually going to be the case when the time comes. So that's the big question. Is he right on that? And if
is
so,
he pushing all his chips in the middle?
I mean, I don't know if everything's life or death like that, but I do think that he is obviously of a very strong belief that is going to be the case, or that is the case. Do the networks feel the same way? And, I think our friend John Kurtz, we mentioned Kuz at the top of the show, but another buddy of ours in the Big 12 circles, John Kurtz, he was talking about a conversation we were having about realignment. I caught part of his show, and he brought up, our feelings about just like the UConn football part just doesn't do it for me. But he made a very valid point that because of the stunted add-on of football based on the scenario that was laid out a couple of days ago, you're basically like, remember how I was saying, like, you're basically investing and hoping that UConn football will be better at some point in time. But as he mentioned, and it's a very good point, if they're not joining for a few more years, who the heck knows what even the league looks like when the time comes? So you might not even ever have to worry about UConn football, because there might not be the situation we're in right now going on 5 years from now, So if, from his standpoint, you can get 2-3 years of UConn basketball, men's and women's, and all that's worth before you even have to worry about football, is that not worth a little bit of a squeeze? And I think that's an interesting way of looking at it. And you could certainly say, like, yeah, that's probably a fair trade-off. If this was straight up everybody on boards at once, I don't think anybody would really be in favor of this outside of probably UConn fans.
Yeah.
But the stunted nature of when you'd add football versus the other sports does make it a lot more intriguing from the standpoint of you're going to get what you're really after initially, and the part that you're not so fond of, maybe you don't even cross that bridge because you never actually arrive there. And that's the interesting information that you're playing with and guessing on if you're Brett Yormark and company.
He said 30 cents on the dollar of basketball is getting. And so he really, clearly there's a 70 cents of a gap there that he wants to make up of what he believes it's worth. So best of luck to him on that. I do think this, though, when it comes to adding UConn into this league, it is already awesome. And while adding UConn or Gonzaga or something into a basketball league like that and creating something different and new is intriguing, just as a college basketball fan, and not even as, a person who likes watching Big 12 games or whatever, I like UConn to be in the Big East in basketball. Like, that's what I
fair.
like.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's what I like.
That's
As somebody who's like, I'm a legitimate college basketball fan. Connecticut, Connecticut versus teams in the Big 12, great, fine. That'll be fun to watch most of the time. But also, I don't know, like, the novelty will wear off to me, I think, a little bit. And
I don't know, man. I think we're sitting in an era where we're talking about the driving force in a lot of TV is brands and matchups.
Yeah.
I mean, what's bigger matchup wise, the Big 12 as it is, or the Big 12 with UConn basketball? All of a sudden, that where you're, and look, I said the other day, you're making this move and you're dabbling on how much money you're actually going to make because you maybe get one game a year against UConn, but that game is UConn Houston, and it's UConn Kansas, and it's UConn Baylor, and it's UConn Arizona, and so that is very interesting. But is it as valuable as he seems to think it is? I don't know that, and that's for the presidents to figure out and ultimately vote on. I know that just based on the tea leaves, like it's anybody's guess as to where that falls right now. Yeah, I mean, I understand where he's coming from. I absolutely get it, and I'm very curious to see how the presidents ultimately land.
One of the things I'll say as we head to the break is that there are a couple of people that I could normally reach out to who I have for a long time, and they would give me some sort of an answer off the record or otherwise. Neither one of them have responded to me. And it's almost like I think they're just kind of waiting. Normally they would, no matter the most tense situations during the realignment comings and goings, they always would respond, but they haven't this time.
Well, it sounds like it's a pretty close little conversation happening at the moment. And so I don't know about you guys, but I would not be surprised if it does happen. I mean, at this stage, we're so far along now that if tomorrow, and Paul better be ready because, I mean, you never know. But if tomorrow they were to announce the UConn's joining, that would not shock me in the slightest at this stage. But if it weren't to happen, that wouldn't shock me either. Like, I think that's how close this thing is. And I totally understand the pro UConn and why that makes sense. But if they decide to stay pat, then I don't think that that's necessarily a bad decision either. So, yeah, man, it's a heck of a gamble either way. And I'm very interested to see where they fall, like I said.
One more thing for us to discuss, right? One more speculation type topic of discussion.